Call the roll.
Senators Baisley, Bridges, Buckner, Coleman, Cutter, Danielson,
She's right here.
Exum, Fields, Gardner,
Excused.
Janal, Gonzalez, Hansen, Hinrichsen, Jaquez Lewis,
Excused.
Kirkmeyer,
Excused.
Kolker, Liston, Lundeen,
Excused.
Marchman, Moreno, Mullica,
Excused.
Pelton B, Pelton R, Priola, Rich, Roberts, Rodriguez, Simpson,
Excused.
Smallwood,
Excused.
Sullivan, Van Winkle, Will, Winter, Zenzinger,
Excused.
Mr. President,
Here. The morning roll call is 27 present, 0 absent, 8 excused. We do have a quorum. Will the good senator from Newcastle please lead us in the pledge?
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators and our special guests in the Senate floor today, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the journal. Senator Rich.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate Journal of Thursday, May the 4th, 2023 be approved as corrected by the Secretary.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. Oh yeah, will the clerk please add Senator Zenzinger to the roll? Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate proceed out of order for tributes.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will proceed out of order for moments of personal privilege. Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we are so grateful to be joined here today, and we have a tribute to acknowledge and honor Mariachi Los Correcaminos de MSU Denver, the MSU Denver's Roadrunners Mariachi. They came and joined us. We'd like to invite you to stand so that we can acknowledge you all for your incredible work. Y'all, these young people are MSU Denver students who are, y'all, they're in the middle of finals, and they found time last night to play at Betcher with the Colorado Symphony. And then they found time this morning to join our Colorado Democratic Latino Caucus as we celebrated Cinco de Mayo. Part of what I'm so grateful to you all for doing is demonstrating how important it is to show up, how important it is to be proud of your culture and to do that work in all of the things that you do, through your music, through our work, through our policy, just by being who you are. Thank you all so much. I want to also acknowledge that because Mariachi Los Correcaminos, the MSU Denver, has been such trailblazers here in Colorado, we actually have 4 different members who are part of Mariachi Estelares de Colorado, the Stellar Mariachi of Colorado. This is a competition that's happening in a coalition with Latino Cultural Arts Center, community arts groups, and the way that folks are bringing culture and visibility to the Latino community across the state. I have a tribute that I want to read to acknowledge the way that y'all just bring energy, heart, and corazón to this work. The Senate of the Colorado Legislature, convened in the first regular session of the 74th General Assembly, hereby extends heartiest congratulations to Mariachi Los Correcaminos de MSU Denver. The members of the Colorado Senate are proud to extend our deepest congratulations and commendation to recognize and thank Mariachi Los Correcaminos de MSU Denver for enriching our community with music, culture, and entertainment. Founded a decade ago in 2013, Mariachi Los Correcaminos, or the Roadrunners, was created by a small group of Adams City High School alumni who united as students at MSU Denver over their love of mariachi. The members of the Colorado Senate are proud to recognize and thank Mariachi Los Correcaminos de MSU Denver for their contributions to creating a valuable experience for musicians and keeping Mexican culture alive by teaching and performing traditional mariachi music. On request of Senator Julie Gonzalez, given this 5th day of May, 2023, State Capitol, Denver, Colorado, signed by Steve Fenberg, President of the Senate. Colleagues, please join me in giving them a round of applause. Thank you.
Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Members, today I've had an opportunity, I should say, this session to bring a lot of different groups here to the Capitol. Had an opportunity to bring Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, as well as the amazing ladies of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, which we have 2 amazing leaders here in our chamber who are members of that sorority. But of course, I had to save the best for last. The state of Colorado, the Senate, House of Representatives convening the first regular session of the 74th General Assembly hereby extends heartiest commendations to the Denver Alumni Chapter, Colorado Springs Alumni Chapter, Omicron Zeta Chapter, and Omicron Pi Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated was founded on January 5th, 1911 on the campus of Indiana University at Bloomington, located at Bloomington, Indiana, by 10 college-educated men. The vision of our founders was to sow the seed of a fraternal tree whose fruit is available to and now enjoyed by college and professional men everywhere, regardless of their color, religion, or national origin. Currently, the fraternity has over 160,000 members within 721 chapters across the United States and internationally. Locally, the Denver alumni chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated has implemented programs to honor our founders' vision. Implemented such programs as the Guide Right and Kappa League programs, which my son and many of our sons are currently in or have gone through and grown up, that provide mentorship for over 60 school-age students. Launched physical and mental health awareness initiatives, as well as provide holiday meals yearly for families in need. In addition, our Kappa Foundation has provided more than $1.5 million in program development and college scholarships over the past 51 years for over 1,000 graduating seniors within the Denver metro area alone. The chapter also currently provides over 100 units of affordable senior housing at both Kappa Tower 1 and Kappa Tower 2, that both reside in my Senate District 33 district. We honored Kappa Alpha Psi Day at the Colorado State Capitol in recognition of the fraternity's tremendous impact across our great centennial state of Colorado, the United States, and worldwide. This is on the request of Senator Rhonda Fields, Janet Buckner, Tony Exum, and myself, as well as Representatives Jennifer Bacon, Elizabeth Epps, Leslie Harrod, Nikita Ricks, Eman Judah, Junie Joseph, and Regina English, given this 5th day of May 2023 here at the state capitol, Denver, Colorado, signed by our own President Steve Fenberg, as well as the Speaker of the House, Julie McCluskey. Members, before we acknowledge our guests, and if anyone else would like to share, they can, I want to say in 2011, I got a phone call. I shared this with the good senator from Centennial, no longer Aurora. We got to update this list. But I shared this with him that in 2011, I got a phone call that my brother, my father's son, we share the same father, was assassinated. He was actually shot point blank in the head and killed. And I was going through a really tough time. That was 2011. I was looking for brothers. I was looking for brothers that I could not only have in relation, but at the same time, do good work, try to make a difference. And, I got an opportunity to meet some of the brothers that are here now. One of the brothers was the individual that led me through as I pledged in spring of 2012. But I remember as I was asking and trying to be a part of this fraternity, just talking about how it was important to have that brotherhood. And so for me, it's deeper than the work we do in community and politics and so many other fields of human endeavor. Our goal is achievement. And so for me, I just wanted to be, I'm grateful for the opportunity to have these brothers here today. And so I wanted us, first and foremost, just acknowledge them as they're here today, but then I also wanted to ask these individuals stand up. Our polemarch, or if you will, our president, Dwayne Moore, please stand. Also, our vice polemarch, Brandon Bruce, our strategist, Walter Tarrant, our board member, Lance Alexander, our Kappa management chair, Leonard Newsom, and also senior Kappa co-chair, Carl Dixon. For all these brothers and the ones standing, can we please give them a round of applause? Thank you, brothers, for being here today. Thank you for continuing to do the work. And also thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity to share this tribute.
Senator Fields.
Good morning, Mr. President and colleagues. I'd like to request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you. Members, I want you to take a look at what brotherhood looks like. I don't have a brother, but these are the brothers, I would say, of our city. And if you heard the number of members they have across the nation, it's their brotherhood that's caring for Black women. They are in love with Black women. They support Black women. Their fathers And it's not easy to be a black man in today's time, but you guys make it look so easy. You make it look so cool. And I'm proud to call you all my brothers as well. Thank you so much.
Will the clerk please add Senators Simpson, Smallwood, Lundeen, and Gardner to the roll? Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like a moment of personal privilege, please.
Granted.
Thank you, members. I have a tribute that I would like to read. Today, on the Friday before Free Comic Book Day, we celebrate All Seas Collectibles, a cherished comic book shop established over 3 decades ago in the heart of Aurora that has played a considerable role in promoting the art of comic books and a love for reading in our state. All Seas Collectibles is a sanctuary for creativity, adventure, and imagination. They offer a warm and welcoming environment for fans of all ages, from the young reader just discovering the world of superheroes to the experienced collector seeking that elusive rare edition. Moreover, they are steadfast in their commitment to give back to the community, supporting charitable causes like Aurora Rise, a nonprofit dedicated to helping survivors of the massacre at Century 16 in Aurora. They have used their platform to positively impact the lives of many, exemplifying the very heroism found within the pages of the comic books they offer. As representatives from All Seas Collectibles join us here today at the Capitol, we commend them for their dedication to inspiring imagination and creativity in the people of Colorado. May they continue to thrive and prosper, bringing joy, inspiration, and a touch of heroism to us all. At the request of Senator Tom Sullivan, given this 5th day of May 2023, signed by the President.
Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. President. You can all be seated. You might have noticed on your desks there this morning, you all got your free comic book. Okay, tomorrow is Free Comic Book Day, and inside I put a list of a lot of the comic book stores across the state and showing the different events or things that they have going on. So pass this along, either keep it for yourself, pass it to your staff, let people know about it. Free Comic Book Day started over 20 years ago, and it's a big celebration. It's kind of the beginning of summer. Tonight or this afternoon, they've already started the new movies. The superhero movies are coming out. So today, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 will be coming out. In the comics that they come out with is big storyline changes. This is when some catastrophe is going to be happening in the United States or in the universe, and Superman and Batman and Spider-Man are going to have to do everything they can all summer long to save it, and that's what they will be writing about all summer long. So I want to, in the back, Darkwing Duck came to say hello to everybody and brought one of the little ducklings with him. My friends James and Trish Farnsworth from All Seas, and AJ Folk and his wife Bonnie. AJ is a survivor from the theater massacre, and AJ and the rest of the people from All Seas have since that day worked on raising money and getting things out to the survivors. They've raised and distributed over $100,000 in the 563 Fridays since that tragedy, and I want to thank them and thank you all for your time today.
Will the clerk please add Senators Jaquez Lewis and Kirkmeyer to the roll? Members, thank you to all of our amazing guests this morning. It really is a special day to have all of you here. I'm sorry that the mariachi band had to move on. It would have been great to greet them as well, but we will stand in a brief recess to greet all of our guests. The Senate will come back to order. Senate services.
May 5th, 2023, correctly engrossed Senate Bill 158 and 306, correctly re-engrossed Senate Bills 303 and 304, correctly revised House Bills 1017, 1041, 1057, 1076, 1081, 1223, 1226, 1240, 1269, 1283, 1290, 1291, 1296, and 1284, correctly re-revised House Bills 1060, 1086, 1199, 1215, 1242, 1254, 1255, 1270, 1285, 1287, 1288, 1293, 1295, 1297, 1303, 1304, 1306, and 1307, correctly enrolled Senate Bills 58, 105, 159, 200, 255, 256, and 258.
Committee reports.
May 4th, 2023, the Committee on Transportation and Energy, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. House Bill 1294 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. May 4th, 2023, the Committee on Judiciary, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. House Bill 1135 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. House Bill 1258 be amended as follows, and as so amended, be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. May 4th, 2023, the Committee on Local Government and Housing, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. House Bill 1253 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. House Bill 1165 be postponed indefinitely. House Bill 1171 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation.
Message from the House.
May 4th, 2023, Mr. President, the House has voted not to concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 1105 and request that a conference committee be appointed. The Speaker has appointed Representatives Titone, Chair Parenti, and Frizzell as House Conferees on the first conference committee on House Bill 1105. The House has granted authorization to go beyond the scope of the differences the bill is transmitted herewith. The House has voted not to concur in the Senate amendments to House Bill 1216 and request that a conference committee be appointed. The Speaker has appointed Representatives Story, Chair Froelich, and Evans as House Conferees on the first conference committee on House Bill 1216. The House has granted authorization to go beyond the scope of the differences the bill is transmitted herewith. The House has voted to concur in the Senate amendments to House Bills 1212, 1218, 1237, 1244, 1233, 1259, 1264, 1236, 1013, 1088, 1138, 1158, 1192, 1214, 1245, 1292, and 1301, and has repassed the bills as so amended. The House has voted to adhere to its position on House Bill 1210, and the bill is transmitted herewith.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the special orders calendar lay over until later today.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the special orders calendar will lay over until later today. Third, Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate proceed out of order for consideration of governor's appointments consent calendar.
The motion is to proceed out of order for consideration of governor's appointments consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will proceed out of order. Consideration of governor's appointments consent calendar. Will the clerk please read all of the appointments on the consent calendar?
Member of the Medical Services Board for a term expiring July 1st, 2026, Adelia Massa Carroll of Arvada, Colorado, to serve as a resident of the 7th Congressional District, a Democrat with knowledge of medical assistance programs, appointed.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the confirmation of the one appointment on the consent calendar, which is the member of the Medical Services Board.
Is there any discussion? See none. The motion is the confirmation of the appointments on the consent calendar. Are there any no votes? With 34 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 1 excused, the appointment is confirmed. Third reading of bills. Will the clerk please read Majority Leader Moreno?
Thank you, Mr.
Don't read
President.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate proceed out of order for consideration of Senate Bill 306.
The motion is to proceed out of order to consider Senate Bill 306. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will proceed out of order. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 306.
Apologies. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 306?
Senate Bill 306, Senators Moreno and Simpson, Representative Valdez and Lindsay, concerning state capital assets in connection therewith, determining office space for the legislative department in the Capitol complex, specifying additional sources of funding and modifying the timing of the funding for certain capital construction projects for state-owned buildings and making an appropriation.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 306 on third reading and final passage.
Is there any discussion? Senator Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just an opportunity to, again, appreciate the Majority Leader asking me to be on this bill with him. I was privileged last year to be on what I think ended up being the last Senate bill introduced, which was tied to this project as well. And heaven help us, this was the last Senate bill offered this year as well. An interesting opportunity to invest capital dollars, really ultimately in the end to save us operating dollars as we bring back particularly the annex building right behind us across the street that is largely vacant, and get state agencies relocated there where they're currently paying private lease space. So a good investment for us. Look forward to your support in an aye vote, and then look forward
going forward, how we make this transition and get all, ultimately to have all the legislators here at the Capitol. Appreciate your support for 306.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I'm in support of 306, but I think it's important as members of the General Assembly that we understand what's going on with their buildings that we have in the Capitol complex, where our offices might be. And, you know, I mean, I've had several people ask me, why is that fence up outside? What are they doing out there on the lawn area? Why do I have to now walk around? What are we doing, kind of stuff. And I know yesterday in committee I asked some questions, and some of it was kind of joking and some of it was not. But, you know, we had a J amendment, or no, we had an amendment in appropriations, Amendment 1, that talks about kind of what we're trying to do here. And I know that the good senator from Commerce City spoke a little bit more about it, but I think it's important that you all understand what we're trying to do. So I'm going to just bring up a few things, and then I would hope that the sponsor would come back up and kind of talk more about in depth about what's going on. But it says here in Amendment 1 that the General Assembly by joint resolution shall designate and assign such space in the Capitol building. So members, we've had people who are across the street. We've got the JBC that's across the street. I mean, it talks about apparently we don't get to define space on the first floor, unfortunately. Because maybe we should be able to. Maybe there should be a third reading amendment here that we should be talking about to designate and assign space on the first floor, I guess for use for other elected officials. But it's also, there's a lot going on with regard to the grounds surrounding the Capitol. If you remember, I think it was last year or maybe the year before, where we had this huge discussion about a fence. And I know jokingly I asked the good senator from Commerce City, like, are you still putting up that fence around the Capitol? Even though they really weren't putting up a fence. But I think it would be great to have that discussion because, again, I've been getting a lot of questions and wondering what's going on with seeing the, you know, temporary fences put up. And so there is a lot happening. And then the other question I had, and I think this I was kind of joking, but I was really very serious, in the tunnel systems that we have. Why are we not utilizing them? Why is it that I have to walk out in the rain when I'm going from this building over to the JBC? Just like yesterday, we had an appropriations meeting, and it was over in LSB, which was fine. But when we get outside, the wind's blowing, messes up my hair, and then it starts raining. And then it's raining, and I've got on my jacket that I don't have like on a rain jacket, so now I'm getting little spots all over my nice coat, my nice jacket. And I'm thinking, what the heck? Why can't we open up the tunnel? Why? And thank you, Senator from Parker. That's a good senator from Parker. That's right. And then think about the safety issue here. I can't tell you the number of legislators that I have seen that jaywalk. That jaywalk. In fact, I see several, I do, you know, because we're all trying to beat the light. And, you know, and because we're running late. How many senators have y'all seen that are supposed to be on their way to appropriations that starts at 8 o'clock in the morning and they're standing at that street going, I gotta get across, I gotta get across. So they run across, and it's a safety issue. So I know I kind of brought it up jokingly yesterday, but I wasn't really joking. I was like, why can't we open up the tunnels? There are tunnels to these buildings. They shouldn't just be used to store old furniture. If we've got stuff down there, crap down there, get it out. We stop hoarding. The state needs to stop hoarding stuff and get rid of things. And let's open up those tunnels. But so I'd like to hear about that, but I think it would be good for all of the members of the Senate to hear what we were hearing about the plans for the Capitol complex from the good senator from Commerce City. Thank you.
Senator Kirkmeyer's office will hereby be moved to the tunnels of the Capitol. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request permission to offer a third reading amendment.
Will you please explain the need for this amendment?
Thank you, Mr. President. Amendment L005 would move the first floor to the underground tunnels.
Majority Leader Moreno. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. In all seriousness, colleagues, L005 is a very technical correction of the amending clause. We just missed a section of statute, so it's a simple correction. I request your permission.
The question before the body is Majority Leader Moreno's request for permission to offer a third reading amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and permission is granted. There's an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read L005?
Amendment
Majority
L005
Leader
is
Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Amendment L005.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, as I mentioned, very simple technical correction that just specifies the correct statutory citation.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of L005 to Senate Bill 360. Are there any no votes? 306. I skipped several bills there. 306. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 34 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 1 excused, L005 is adopted. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. And colleagues, thanks for your attention to this matter. Senate Bill 306, obviously a critical piece of making the necessary renovations in the Capitol complex space in order to accommodate the growing needs of the legislature, and as well as the additional benefit allowing more executive branch agencies to reduce their leased space footprint, which ultimately saves taxpayer dollars. To the Senator from Brighton's questions, I think they're good ones, and you'll notice in Senate Bill 306 there is this process outline where the Executive Committee, the Office of Legislative Legal Services, Legislative Council, the Auditor's Office, and the Governor's Office will come together, they'll meet, they'll talk about what the space needs are, and I imagine and I expect some of that conversation would also include how can we make it more convenient in terms of access for legislators. So if that means exploring opening up those tunnels to actually allow people to move back and forth between legislative buildings in an easier fashion, that's obviously something that we will make sure to discuss.
Senator Liston.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I sit on Appropriations Committee, and I was pleased to hear about Senate Bill 306, and I supported it in Appropriations, and I support it now. And on behalf of, I'm here to speak on behalf of my fellow caucus members on both sides of the aisle, those of us who are across the street in what I euphemistically call the leper colony. Up on the 6th floor, I think this is for those of us in the leper colony, you know, we always have to come over here to find out what's going on and, cross the street, the snow, the sleet, the buses, and so forth. So I think this is, it's due time, past time, because we don't ever get to see leadership. Of course, maybe that's a blessing. But so if Moses won't come to the flock will come to Moses. And but I think it's a good idea that all of us are together, the House and the Senate, because we really do miss a lot of the buzz, the excitement, the camaraderie, the knowledge of what's going on when we're split, like I say, a third or more of us over in the leper colony. So on behalf of the members of the leper colony, I urge an aye vote on Senate Bill 306. Thank you very much. Yes, if they want to join. Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader.
Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. I only have one question for the bill sponsors. I had heard some rumors about, with the move towards mandating electric charging stations everywhere else across our state, what the plan would be for not only the Capitol, but also for the area around LSB and particularly SSB. So I wanted to know, A, if that has already been approved and if we will have electric vehicle charging stations there, and if so, if those will be something that's paid for by the state, or if the user of those charging stations should plan to use a pay-as-you-go service like ChargePoint or something along those lines. Thank you.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the Senator from Parker for the question. Charging infrastructure has been a topic of conversation, I would say, for both, I would say, the Capital Development Committee as well as the Capitol Building Advisory Committee, which I serve on. There is actually charging infrastructure available in the Merrick Garage across the street. And so there is that opportunity. It is a long-term goal of mine that we would move most of the parking to that Merrick Garage, which would open up that opportunity to charge your vehicle. I'm about to say something controversial. It would mean that the circle parking in the Capitol would not continue, and we would all move to the garage, and our Capitol would become the grounds that it should be for all to enjoy. But again, that is not part of this bill. That is a longer-term aspiration of mine.
Senator Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to touch on that point, there is a Capitol complex, a master plan for where we're headed, and just an outline of it was, and the intent was to reimagine the way Coloradans interact with state government, create functional and healthy workplaces, improve accessibility, improve energy efficiency, ensure security and safety, and then support opportunities for childcare services, EV, and renewable energy. So I haven't pulled the plan up itself, but I know that was the context of what the plan was intended to do.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, and if the long-term goal is that all the parking has to be over in the parking garage, then that says we need another tunnel. And we should open up the tunnels, right? I mean, because again, it's also about safety. Like, for example, last night, many of us were leaving well, some people got to leave a lot earlier, but some of us were here till 10, 11 o'clock at night, and, we're out. Some people were 1:15 a.m., so they were here this morning earlier than all the rest of us. But again, it's about a safety issue. I know for myself and many others, walking out in the dark, at this time of year, it's dark later, but, when it's 5:30, 6 o'clock and you're walking out to your vehicle and there's fences up all over the place, it's a little, you kind of worry a little bit. So it's back to looking at the tunnels for that. But that was not the reason why I came back down to the well, because I got a text. And yesterday, there was also discussion about the SS building, right? About having the possibility for a rooftop lounge. I mean, I know I've been up there when it was human services stuff. So there was opportunities there that I would hope you would also tell the members about. But the other thing is the text I got was from our friends that are out in the lobby. When they heard me talking about mentioning opening up the tunnels, they also have a discussion about, and I don't know if this is in the plans or if it's a possibility to start putting it into the plans, but a place, I don't want to call it a lounge, but more like a workstation kind of area that lobbyists can go and use. So instead of, maybe, I don't know, but they're just asking if there's a place. And so apparently there maybe is a spot, but they're asking about for them as well. If we're going to open up the tunnels, would they be able to use the tunnels? Would we think about them being able to use these other spaces, or are they just for legislators? So if you could also speak to that, I'd appreciate it.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I think the workstation that the senator from Brighton is describing is called the basement cafeteria, because that's essentially what it's become. But yes, in conjunction with all of this movement of legislative staff, legislators coming back to the Capitol, there would be a discussion about the basement space and how we can make that more accommodating for more people. And so that is a key element of all of this, and there are some renovations that are needed to that basement space to make it more suitable for both visitors and for folks that work in the building. The last thing I'll mention, because it was asked, the Capitol Annex building, which is across the street, which all you know, I'm sure, is vacant because the Department of Revenue consolidated their operations in their facility in Lakewood. It's been vacant for a while. As part of the plans, and we've been meeting with the architects, it would mean that the Department of Revenue had this beautiful hearing room where they conducted tax appeal hearings, and it has this beautiful Art Deco mural and architecture. Happy to arrange maybe a tour for everyone after we finish these last few days of session. But part of it would be that would be modified to become meeting space for the legislature that would be available. In conjunction with that, there is a large outdoor terrace that is currently not available to, or not, hasn't been modified in order to be used, but the proposal would be that we would modify that so that we would have an outdoor rooftop space where the legislature could also utilize that to host gatherings or any kind of other thing that folks are anticipating. So it's really exciting, and happy to share any of the plans with folks if you're interested and arrange a tour, hopefully after sometime after session. But it is very exciting stuff, and happy to inform folks of the developments.
Minority Leader Lundin.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise in support of 306. I'll confine my comments specifically to the Capitol Annex. When you consider the Parthenon in Greece, or in Athens, it is by many considered to be the most beautiful building ever built. Its columns and the beauty of it. There's an echo of that in our Capitol complex in Washington, D.C., in the federal enclave. The Lincoln Memorial has the same beautiful columns and same beautiful lines. I would argue in the state of Colorado portfolio of real estate, the Capitol Annex building is potentially the most beautiful building we have in our portfolio. It was built in 1939, 1941. It's got that beautiful Art Deco look on the outside and elements of the inside. The architect was G. Meredith Music. I think that's how it's pronounced. It's M-U-S-I-C-K. And there are artworks and accoutrements in the building from the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, during the Depression immediately following and during World War II. It was the art style. And there are some already elements in the building that are WPA art. And we have elsewhere in the state's portfolio other artworks that are from that same design standard that could be folded into that building. And so it is a beautiful building. It can be made a more beautiful building, and it can connect us. And this is where it's really challenging for a constitutional conservative who wants the smallest government possible, but still honors history and desires legacy that connects tomorrow to today to yesterday on behalf of what Colorado is and who the people of Colorado have been. This is one of those moments. It's not necessarily a monument, but it's something that can connect us as a people to our legacy. And I think that's important, and I'm grateful to support it in that intention and in that way. And for us as people, as legislators, this is, quite frankly, a very important step forward on what I have perceived to be, and many of us share this, a goal as a legislator. When I showed up here 9 years ago, I thought, this process would work so much better if all the legislators were in the Capitol, as they originally were when the Capitol was first built, because so much of this business is highly relational when we function at our best. And the relationships aren't fostered and they don't grow if you don't have contact. And if you've got one group of people going to one building, another group of people going to another building, and a third group of people staying in another building, you don't get that relational contact. You don't get that water cooler conversation. I'm using that water cooler conversation as a metaphor for the incidental, spontaneous, unintended conversations where the spark of an idea blooms into a bipartisan policy that serves the people of Colorado better. And so I think this process we're on to seek to get all 100 members of the General Assembly back into the Capitol building as it once was is a good thing. Now, The bridge too far that I would like to go is I would like to get the judiciary back in this building and cut down to size, the executive branch completely restrained and back in the building, because that's the way the state of Colorado once was. Everything was in this building, and that's all the bigger state government was. Now, wouldn't that be a wonderful picture? That's the bridge too far. So let me, while I'm speaking of bridges, there is one thing that I do think we need to unlock this and think about this, and it is the safety of the individuals, the bridges, the bridge, he's never a bridge too far, the good senator from, I'm going to say Cheyenne Wells because everybody's from Cheyenne Wells, I've discovered. Never a bridge too far, always the appropriate bridges. But there is a safety component of if we move more of the staff over across the street into the Capitol Annex and they're coming and going back and forth, and we perhaps are also coming and going back and forth across 14th, it's important that we have kind of safe all-weather passage. My predecessor in the role I'm in right now, Minority Leader Holbert, wanted to build a beautiful sky bridge. And okay, so that's a possibility. The development of tunnels might be a possibility. But certainly, whatever we can do to make sure that the intersection and the transfer back and forth from the Capitol Annex to the Capitol needs to be made safe. And that's an important piece of what this can be. And I'm confident that safety is always first, and that we will press safety forward as we think about what this looks like. But this is one of those moments where I am rising to say, yes, let's spend money on state government in a way that I think connects tomorrow to today to yesterday through architecture, and quite frankly, fosters the development of relationships among the legislators serving the people in the building. Thank you, Mr. President, for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader, and the good senator from Alamosa for sponsoring this last Senate bill of this session. Pleased to be supportive.
Senator Priola.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I rise in support of this bill. I listened to the banter in appropriations about the architecture, so on and so forth. Art Deco is my favorite form of architecture as well. And the debate here has spurred an idea, given the nature of the legislature now, the early mornings to late evenings, it might be worth considering converting that beautiful Art Deco building into apartments or hotel rooms for the safety and the health of future members of the legislature, where, you know, at 1:30 in the morning, such as last night in finance, we could just simply walk across the street and you know, check into our hotel room and then just walk right back over, and it would, you know, it would save, cut down on commute time. It would be better for our cortisol levels and so on and so forth. So that is something that should be given consideration when considering the redevelopment of the beautiful Capitol Annex building.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I feel an air of resignation in your recognition. Members, first of all, I want you to know in this discussion of office space and location and all that for several years I was on the 6th floor of the State Services building, and I think if it's going to be referred to in any way, that it would be better to refer to it as the office space for people who suffer from Hansen's disease. Even though they're a very small number of our population, those who have the disease more commonly known as leprosy, I think it's pejorative. With respect to my colleague from El Paso County, I think it's pejorative to loop them in as some, because of the disease, as some undesirable population. Having spent time over there, I actually found it preferable because the walls, while I'm an assistant minority leader, as you know, and I have an office with walls that go all the way to the ceiling, so when you shut the door and you say things about your bills and colleagues, it doesn't bleed over. Those offices all have walls that go to the ceiling, and you can feel free to malign people as you wish. without everyone else hearing, as well as engage in confidential conversations more seriously. So I have had some concerns about it. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. You know, the history of this is that there was a moment in time when all of the redesign and everything was going on. We had the space formerly known as Room 271, more commonly known as the bullpen. That is, suddenly, who knew? It's the old state library. And when we lost all that space and some space on the third floor, the question then was, as we managed this space, and that's what this bill is about, who would reside in the basement, and how would that work, and so forth. And my recollection, I don't want to improperly attribute, but my recollection was that the leadership at the time in both chambers made a conscious decision to have the Office of Legislative Legal Services remain in the building. And having resided in the sixth floor and all of the things that go with that, I have to say I preferred to make the walk across Colfax to the floor and be here on the floor and have our staff personnel readily available to us without having to have them make a trip from the sixth floor across Colfax to get to me, to talk to me about the amendments I needed during second reading. So I'm disturbed if you're asking what's this got to do with the bill. This bill in its first incarnation and now is at page 4, it sets up office space in what will be the amended 23507 of the Colorado Revised Statutes, says the office, and it's referring to the Office of Legislative Legal Services, shall be provided with suitable office space in the state capitol complex that is within 1/4 mile of the Capitol building, so situated as to be convenient for the members of the General Assembly. That won't really be convenient for me, a 1/4 mile. Throughout the year, the office shall be kept open during the hours prevailing in other legislative staff offices in or near the state capitol, and at such other times in order to effectively serve the General Assembly. Well, again, my own experience here is that I was far better off to have staff of the office, as well as the director and deputy director, readily available while doing work here in the Capitol than to have them across the street. It worked better for me to be over there. Not to mention, you're far less accessible. And while I want to be accessible to my constituents, I don't always want to be all that accessible to others during the session. That's the reason I liked it so much over in what was known as the office space for those who suffer from Hansen's disease. It really is a choice. The senator from Monument raised some excellent points about our interaction, and it would be great if we could figure out how to get everybody packed into this building. It is just really difficult. Having, again, been in the so-called bullpen, not to disparage bulls, but it was hard to do confidential business there. everybody knew, and lobbyists didn't even, while they were supposed to stop, once they got past the gate, if you'll remember, Fran used to sit there at the front, and once they got to one of your offices, then they could run the maze. So we are far better off, and we're better off, and we have better control and better security on the 6th floor across the street than we had at that time. Having said that, I mean, my first year here at the Capitol, one's constituents didn't have to go, nor did anyone else have to go through security. They just walked right on in and knocked on your door. We were far more accessible in those days. Unfortunately, we had some incidents, and it led, as part of this issue of managing the space at the Capitol complex, to having metal detectors, and we've lost something. And just in the same way as the Senator from Monument, Mr. Minority Leader notes, when we're not all together, there is something lost. But I actually found on the 6th floor, there was a great deal of camaraderie there, and a better kitchen, by the way. And better conference rooms. So there is something to recommend that. I think this will remain a conundrum. I look at other capitals around the country, at what they've done. Some of them seem to be far more willing to spend large amounts of money on office buildings for legislators. I think that we maintain the model of citizen legislators and limited staff, and that is a good model. Others will disagree, I know. But if we were to go down that road of additional staff and so forth, we'd need to be looking. We can't, I don't think we can very well condemn the block over here at 13th and Broadway. I think they'd claim a separation of powers issue if we did that. So there's very little we can do. I guess we can go to the east with a building in the future, and that might be, and then we could have a tunnel, and then we'd start to look a lot like the Congress. But then what would be lost is how much time we spend together on the floor. You know, one of the things about the dynamic is that when we're here together on the floor, we interact not only about business, but as people, and that's useful. Having said that, I guess my biggest concern is that I think one's ability to do business and get amendments done and have staff respond during times such as we're going through now with very limited time, where I feel the pressure of time to finish my remarks here. I think it'll be harder to get an amendment done. It'll be harder to have a discussion. It'll be harder on all of us to do our work, notwithstanding that today we have to have several members across the street, albeit in adequate office space, but office space that's within a quarter of a mile, so to speak. I think it's about 200 yards, maybe an eighth of a mile. So I appreciate members think about this as you go forward. It turns out that these kinds of decisions affect how we do business on a daily basis in very real ways, and they represent fundamental choices. Many of you who have served with me know that there's a particular former Senate president whose name I mutter every time I try to get down the aisles, because these chairs that were chosen, instead of being what used to be in the House, now they have big chairs like this too. We had somewhat smaller but very comfortable chairs in the House, and you could get up and down the aisle. Now you have to tap everybody on the back and be a pain and a bother. And I only tell that story because these space, furniture, positions, all of those things matter as to proximity of who you talk to. I've experienced this as an attorney in organizational settings, that when the legal office and the attorney's office is in the same hallway with the contracting people, they tend to stop you in the hall and say, I need to talk to you about something, and they do. And if you're in the next building over, they only come to talk to you once they've been sued. And I think that's the example of what we have here is you're far more likely to talk to people when you're together about a bill, about an issue, about whether or not you're going to have an interim committee to study interim committees or not next year. And that facilitates what is the best of our environment and interaction here. I thank you, Mr. President, and I thank your colleagues for listening to me patiently about how important these matters of space, of furniture, of all affect our interactions and how we do our jobs as legislators.
Will the clerk please add Senator Mullica to the roll? Seeing no further discussion, the motion is the adoption of Senate Bill 306. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Bill 306 is passed. Co-sponsors: Senators Priola, Hansen, Kirkmeyer, Bridges, Janal, Minority Leader Lundin, Liston, Gonzalez, please add the President. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate proceed out of order for consideration of Senate Bill 158.
The motion is to proceed out of order to take up Senate Bill 158. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will proceed out of order. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 158?
Senate Bill 158, Senators Gonzalez and Gardner, Representatives Gonzalez, Gutierrez, and Wiseman, concerning the continuation of the Colorado Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 158 on third reading.
Is there any discussion? Senator Gardner.
Thank you, members. Members, there were several amendments last evening on Senate Bill 158, which is the continuation of the Colorado Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice. In committee, after a lot of discussion about what is commonly known as the CCJJ, there was an amendment that made the committee report to extend the CCJJ for only 1 year. That was to continue to have the conversation about the role of the CCJJ, whether the adult criminal portion of it should be done by that commission, whether juvenile justice should be a separate commission. A lot of discussions around those matters. At the request of my distinguished co-prime sponsor, the senator from Denver, we added several amendments. And if you'll look at the engrossed version of the bill, you'll see, and it always amazes me at how well our staff from 8 or 9 or 10 o'clock at night to 9 o'clock the next morning, or even 7:30, is able to get all these things done with underlining in between, but that's the age in which we live. The first part of the bill on page 2 is the sunset review at 2/3/1203, and it just says the following statutory authorizations for the designated advisory committees are scheduled for repeal on September 1, 2024. And then it says the Colorado Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice created in section 1611.3102. So that is the core of the bill. There are other changes in the legislative declaration that we made, and they are, they are substantive. I would not say they are substantial, if that makes sense. In fact, if you look, a good deal of the language, though underlined, is in sentence case, lowercase primarily. The uppercase additions are really what got changed in the alleged declaration. And you get things like the number of offenders projected to be sentenced in the future. We previously said will require greatest percentage of state budget. Now we say may require. So we don't want to presuppose that we will have more state budget in incarceration. And we add the phrase, unless non-carceral and effective interventions are developed that decrease prison populations while decreasing recidivism and creating healthier, safer, and crime-free communities, which is an excellent thought and goal. The next paragraph, we added that things should be research-based, which I think is a hallmark of CCJJ work. Some may disagree, but we wanted to make the point that the work should be research-based. And then in the Ledge Deck, we said it's in the best interest of the public, this is old language, to engage in a comprehensive evidence-based analysis of the circumstances and characteristics of the offenders being sentenced to. And then we added, and residing in the Department of Corrections, old language back, the alternatives to incarceration, and then added the language, the availability of transitional and housing resources for offenders to support successful reentry. We go on. At page 3, one of our amendments makes changes to the membership slightly in the CCJJ. At the time the CCJJ was formed in 2007, we did not have a behavioral health administration, as you know, and that we had a member on CCJJ, do have a member on CCJJ, that is the executive director of DHS or designee. We've changed that to the commissioner of the Behavioral Health Administration or the designee, the commissioner's designee. That is because Behavioral Health Administration is really what is the concern and a very large concern of criminal justice matters. We also, rather than having the executive director of higher ed, we changed that to a representative of higher ed with experience, expertise in the topic of criminal justice. As it seemed, I believe, that someone whose background is higher ed without anything further might not contribute as much to the conversation. We had, instead of having an expert in juvenile justice issues, we are going to have 2 criminal defense attorneys, at least one of whom must be an attorney in a rural judicial district. I think it's important because the criminal justice issues and how they're handled, the resources available, such as providers and social services, differ between rural and metro communities here in Colorado. One member who's a representative, and we previously had one member that could be from community corrections or behavioral mental health, substance abuse. We broke that out, so now we have one member who is from behavioral mental health and substance abuse disorder, and also a separate one member who is a representative of the community corrections provider. And then one member who works with a community-based reentry program. So that's important with respect to rehabilitation and recidivism. In our hearings, as well as in discussions with stakeholders, people who are interested in the process, as we went through it, one of the most significant things we heard was that for people who are not directly involved in the CCJJ process, they're not members of CCJJ or staff to some of those people, participation was a great challenge. The meetings happen once a month. There are task force meetings on top of that and working group meetings. A lot of people saying it's very, very hard. Those are open meetings, but because of times and places, very difficult. So we put language in to require the chairperson to make every effort to schedule meetings at a time and location in a manner that maximizes participation by all interested parties. Language involves nuances, and we had some amendments last night that changed language in ways that was very nuanced. For instance, at page 4, on the duties of the commission and the mission. Right now, the language reads that the mission of the commission is to enhance public safety, to ensure justice, and to ensure protection of the rights of victims. That is being changed and was changed by amendment to say, to promote a just and fair criminal justice system for all purposes, which I think is a more nuanced and more expansive way of saying ensuring justice. And instead of simply leaving it as to ensure protection of the rights of victims, we made clear that they were rights of the victims arising from constitutional and statutory sources. A more expansive or more detailed explanation of what we meant by victims' rights. We previously, or at this time, say that the work of the Commission will focus on evidence-based recidivism reduction initiatives, and we struck recidivism reduction and just say on evidence-based initiatives and the cost-effective expenditure of limited criminal justice funds. And then in the duties, you know, it's interesting. Sometimes when our drafters go through, they pick up things that in earlier versions maybe were not as clear as they might be, and those get suggested as well. So on page 5, when we're talking about the Commission's duties, it currently reads to conduct an empirical analysis as if there would be only one. Now it says to conduct empirical analyses to make clear that there would be multiple analysis to be done. Current duties are to investigate effective alternatives to incarceration, comma, the factors contributing to recidivism. That's been expanded and is much more detailed and nuanced now. It will read to investigate effective alternatives to incarceration for all offenders who can be safely placed in alternative programs, which, by the way, I would comment that in my work in CCJJ, that seems to be the guiding philosophy of the vast majority, if not all, of the members of the Commission. So this is a description of the work that they would be doing. We did add, by amendment, an entire new sentence of duties to investigate effective intervention for persons involved in the criminal justice system who are suffering from behavioral health disorders, and how the criminal justice system can more effectively intervene with that population through evidence-based practices. Another duty at F, to work with other state-established boards, task forces, or commissions that study or address criminal justice issues, and to make clear, and community groups that work with violence prevention, offender reentry, restorative justice, and victim and survivor support. I think this was part of the guiding philosophy and practice of CCJJ, but this makes that much clearer. We then have provisions regarding at what is currently Section 16, 11.3103, duties of the Commission, mission staffing. The Commission shall establish advisory committees, which, and we added this, which must include task forces and working groups. We already have and have been using task forces and working groups for some time, so I think this conforms with the CCJJ practice. The chairperson of an advisory committee, right now we say that the chairman of an advisory committee may select non-commissioned members from interested members of the community to serve on the advisory committee, task force, or working group. And I believe to some extent this was the case. My experience of being on a task force and a working group was that we welcomed anyone who wanted to pitch in and be a part of the conversation. But there seemed to have been some doubt about whether that was an open invitation. And so now instead of saying that the chairperson may select non-commissioned members, it says they shall select non-commissioned members. Doesn't say how many, it doesn't say of what particular types other than a diverse group of subject matter experts. I would assume, and I hope, and I think is best practice, that they would represent a diversity of views about criminal justice, recidivism, sentencing, sentencing philosophies, all of those things. All of this, I think, as I have a chance to review it with you this morning, taken more time to review it with you this morning than I was able last night. I think most of this, if it has an overall theme, it is to give the Commission more direction and in places less discretion. I think broad discretion is good, but if it is not focused, then it can sort of run out there, as CCJJ has for 17 years and done valuable and important work, but perhaps there have developed different views and thoughts even on the CCJJ itself as to what the CCJJ would be about. So the Commission shall respond, not at its discretion may respond, but the Commission shall respond to inquiries referred by members of the General Assembly and the Governor. But we have removed the Chief Justice as someone that a required response is. In my experience, and I don't know, you might hear differently from Director Hilke, in my experience, I don't think that the Chief Justice has been active there, and in fact, as a separation of powers notion, it might not really be appropriate. We've had a lot of discussions in the intervening 17 years about that. I think it's always been understood that the staff at the Division of Criminal Justice was responsible for staffing CCJJ and the Commission. But now we make it clear that the division shall insist in the preparation of materials necessary for the implementation of policy recommendations and legislative recommendations supported by the Commission. I actually wasn't aware that that was an issue, as I've gotten the support that I have needed and have not heard complaints, but it is important. One of the things that I encountered as a new member of CCJJ was a good deal of briefings, a number of briefings from recognized experts. And those recognized experts were quite helpful to me. We're going to add a provision, are adding a provision here that the Commission's going to conduct regular meetings to inform members by recognized experts. And so I think there will be a renewed emphasis on that. I think one of the most challenging pieces of our amendments is concerning providing a translator. The particular amendment says the Division of Criminal Justice shall provide a translator or interpreter qualified in the Spanish language to provide oral translation in Spanish for every public commission and advisory meeting, and written translation into Spanish of every publicly available document considered or produced by the commission or an advisory committee. As I stated last night, I think this is very desirable. I think improved understanding, access, availability, all of those values are important. My concern, and this goes on about requests and defines qualified translator or interpreter. I hope that this bill gets through House Appropriations because the appropriation for this will be large. I don't think it'll be, I guess I just can't speculate. I asked myself last night as I acquiesced to the addition of this, and again, the only reservation I have about it is a fiscal one. As with so many other things where we see a lot of desirable objectives, many objectives that we have to make tough choices on. I don't know whether this is $1 million thing or a $500,000 thing or just a $250,000 thing. I think the translation of meetings is probably one increment of funding. The translation of every document is probably quite another. All in all, the thing that, well, and I have one more amendment that was added at page 8. Again, duties of the commission. This is 1611.3103 again. We changed a date. Before, we had said on or before May 1 of each even-numbered year, the commission shall request a letter from the governor suggesting topics for the commission to study. Now we're changing that to on or before July 1. And we're striking language. Right now, the language says, in preparing the letter, the governor is encouraged to consult with the Chief Justice of the Colorado Supreme Court and the majority and minority leaders of the House of Representatives and the Senate. That seemed right and appropriate in 2007. I remember then Senator John Morris, who later became Senate President for a period of time, was key in the drafting and the advocacy for the CCJJ and it becoming law. So that language seemed right in 2007. I think in 2023, we believe that language that says the commission shall provide the opportunity to all commission members, advisory committee members, and other interested community groups to provide topics for study to be submitted to the governor in conjunction with the commission's request for a letter from the governor. I would envision that, and just simply my understanding of how this might work is that the governor might simply put out a notice or a call to all of the folks in the community as they do for nominations for advisory boards and many, many other stakeholder things. And then there is this encouragement to the governor. I guess this is the way to say that. We can't tell the governor how to do certain things. We can certainly tell the executive branch a lot of things, but the governor and his power as governor, which is, in my view, plenary, and only bounded by the Constitution and certain things that are permitted to be limited by statute, including his budget. The governor is encouraged to consider the input provided and is encouraged to consult with the majority and minority leaders of the Senate and House of Representatives and the chairs of the Judiciary Committee of the Senate and House of Representatives or any successor committees. So those are the changes. At its core, I think what this extension for only 1 year and those amendments are about is, and I say this for the benefit of those who might not have been listening last evening, who are engaged in the CCJJ practice or CCJJ process, that we will be looking very seriously over the coming year about whether CCJJ should continue, if it should continue, in what form, what membership, should there be, I think a core and key question and idea is whether we should have a separation of adult criminal justice as a commission or task force or whatever one would call it, and juvenile justice as a separate task force. We did for a period of time have a Juvenile Justice Reform Commission that was very focused in what it did, but it functioned in much the same way as the CCJJ did. So that's one model. It had more people with juvenile justice experience, although interestingly enough, even then, I saw many of the same faces at the CCJJ meetings as I saw as the Juvenile Justice Reform Commission meetings, because there is overlap. And I think at the time that CCJJ was first enacted, instituted, promulgated, I think the belief was that juvenile and criminal justice were necessarily intertwined, that there were similar considerations, there was a continuum of issues and problems, offenses in the statute books, while they would not be handled as a criminal matter for juveniles, they are nevertheless the yardstick by which we measure whether or not the juvenile's conduct is a violation of law and at what level and so forth. I appreciate your patience and listening. This is a very important commission. It has done a lot of work over the years and had a very large influence over criminal justice statutes, system, everything in the state of Colorado. It has, in my experience, done excellent work on large items. So our misdemeanor reform, well known as Senate Bill 271, I think. It was enacted by this body, and not without its critics. I think the larger product there was quite good and did very well. Inevitably, we had discussions from people in the community about whether or not particular changes were made, and we've done some refinement on those. I think that's inevitable. It is, after all, a process. And it is, after all, a process that whether or not there's a CCJJ, one of the things that I often said to CCJJ colleagues who were not legislators is, don't ever forget, whatever you recommend still has to be enacted by the Colorado General Assembly. It is not as if you operate in a vacuum or you send something off and you don't lose control of it when it gets introduced. Much like my service on the Uniform Law Commission, which is a private association technically, but it has a great deal of influence as a commission. It puts out lots of uniform laws, and many of my colleagues on the Uniform Law Commission forget that once their product comes out their door, it is up to legislators to look at it, review, decide, determine whether or not it is a good product. My co-prime sponsor may have comments as well, or reclama, or affirmation, or many other things. It has been my privilege to work on this bill this year, and I thank my co-prime sponsor for her work and for her thoughts. We obviously have not agreed on everything in CCJJ, but we have brought you this bill for your consideration, and I ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since we're reading things, I'll take the time to read an email that I received along with the good senator from Colorado Springs, along with other members of the CCJJ, directed to the director and the executive director of the Department of Public Safety, Stan Hilke. And this is from an individual who has served on many task forces from CCJJ over the course of many years, since the CCJJ was first incepted. I recently found out that CCJJ created a reentry task force that consists of members listed here per the CCJJ website. I've long complained that the CCJJ doesn't have adequate community representation, but this is especially glaring and quite frankly stunning, given this task force is focused on reentry. There is no representation from community reentry, sober living, or community housing providers that are vital to successful reentry. These are the type of people with on-the-ground experience that should make up a large chunk of the membership of this reentry task force. With no disrespect intended to the existing members, the overall composition of this reentry task force does not have the experience or expertise to tackle this complex problem with any deep competency. Also, the lack of adequate racial and ethnic diversity is a chronic and, quite frankly, intolerable problem with CCJJ and its task forces. You can't expect one person to check 3 boxes as a person with lived experience, a community reentry provider, and the only person of color from community on this task force. That is the hallmark of tokenism. The CCJJ is almost all white. The task forces, of which I've been on many, have also been either all white or almost all white. That's just not acceptable, given that most people impacted both by crime and the criminal legal system are people of color. You know I have been a volunteer on many CCJJ task forces over the years. I've raised issues around the lack of community representation, authentic community engagement, and diversity for over a decade. I've tried to be a team player despite these deep shortcomings and concerns, and have even actively recruited people of color from community to apply to serve on CCJJ and task forces. But I'm done and will be resigning from the Sentencing Reform Task Force. It is my experience that CCJJ has failed to create a culture and practice that appreciates, respects, or values community participation, and has failed to take concrete steps to ensure racial and ethnic diversity on the Commission and on its task forces. In speaking with the one member who was asked to check 3 boxes, he asked me, I'm trying to not name the person, in speaking with the one person who checks 3 boxes, I'll say, he asked me to tell you that he shares my concerns about the composition of the reentry task force and the lack of diversity. He is also reconsidering his ongoing participation. Our organization has not weighed in on the CCJJ Sunset Bill, but this reentry task force and the stunt at the last CCJJ meeting of trying to weaponize the CCJJ to oppose another CCJJ member's bill in violation of CCJJ policy and integrity has tipped the scales for me. I share that because I have seen the ways, having served as one of the members to this commission for the entirety of my service in this General Assembly. The way in which we hear rhetoric and are expected to sit and smile. The way that, yes, the CCJJ is a big player when it comes to criminal justice policy here in this chamber. And I share with you, not my experience, but the experience of fellow commissioners and members who no longer participate. To my knowledge, this email was received. There has been no response offered. In committee, I voted no on the continuation of this policy, of this commission, because I think that whereas CCJJ in the past has served as an important neutral space to talk about policy, over the time that I have served on this body, it has not become a place that is responsive. It has not been a place where dialogue can happen. I offered the amendments that I did on second reading. Both as a clear, and I didn't even offer all of the amendments that I had drafted. The other amendments that I had drafted were about the composition of voting members and removing the juvenile justice portion. But in the spirit of collaboration, in the spirit of trying to proceed forward, I offer those amendments. Vote your conscience on this bill. Thank you.
See no further discussion. The motion, Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request a senatorial 5.
Senate will stand in a senatorial 5. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 158 lay over to the end of the calendar.
The motion is to lay over Senate Bill 158 to the end of the calendar. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Senate Bill 158 will lay over to the end of the calendar. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1017?
House Bill 1017, Representatives Kipp and Bockenfeld, Senators Bridges and Van Winkle, concerning improvements to the electronic sales and use tax simplification system and in connection therewith, making an appropriation.
Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1017 on third reading and final passage.
Is there any discussion?
Good bill, vote yes.
Seeing none, the motion is the passage of House Bill 1017. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1017 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Kolker, Priola, Cutter, Henriksen, Hawkes Lewis, Zenzinger, Malika, Roberts,
Greyhounds.
Please add the president. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1041?
House Bill 1041, Representatives Duran and Lynch, Senators Janal and Simpson, concerning a prohibition against wagering on races of greyhounds that are simulcast from out-of-state tracks at which the races are conducted.
Senator Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 23-1041 on third reading and final passage. Ask for an aye vote.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of House Bill 1041. Are there any no votes? Senators Rich, Pelton R. With a vote of 33 ayes, 2 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1041 is passed. Co-sponsors, Mr. Majority Leader, Bridges, Priola, Cutter, will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1057?
House Bill 1057, Representatives McCormick and Vigil, Senator Hawkes Lewis, concerning a requirement that certain public buildings have restrooms with amenities for all genders and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Senator Hawkes Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1057 on third reading and final passage and ask for your aye vote.
Is there any discussion? Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. President. And colleagues, there was a lot going on during second reading when this bill came up. So I actually just have a couple of questions for the sponsor, mostly financial in nature, because as I see it, this is actually kind of a very interesting way to tackle an extremely controversial issue in society right now. I mean, you can hardly read a news journal, be on a feed, certainly anything related to politics or social issues without something coming up when it relates to gender and all genders. So whether we're talking about athletics, for example, like you hardly have a week go by where somebody's not dipping their toe into this issue to talk about something like athletics. And invariably, when dealing with what is now apparently a super controversial political issue, I would go as far as say maybe a hot button political issue, restrooms and locker rooms seem to be one of those things that come up very, very frequently. So to see a bill that sort of is addressing this head on, right? You can't skate around the edges when there's a bill in front of you about restrooms. I think it causes a lot of us to pause a little bit, to say, if this is a concern for people, be it, I would say, more as a social issue than a political issue, what bolder way to address it than with a mandate on state government like this? So I love the fact that the senator from Boulder County brought it up and is forcing people at least to think about it, maybe not necessarily willing to come up and talk about it, but certainly to think about it, because you're going to have a vote next to your name on it. So I think it's actually a pretty creative way. I like this bill's attempt to address changing stations. You all have heard me say too many times, as the father of 3 boys, I was that guy with the what's the movie with the baby Bjorn? Somebody rescue me.
Look Who's Talking?
What is it?
Look Who's Talking?
No. The Hangover.
3 Men and a Baby?
The Hangover.
Oh.
The Hangover.
Twins.
So apparently, citizens of Colorado, there are lots of movies where a male is wearing a baby Bjorn with a child in it. And that was me in the late 90s and early 2000s, finding myself far too frequently looking desperately for a place to change my my little baby boy's diaper, and ending up placing him on a passenger seat of a vehicle in a parking lot or something along those lines, praying that he doesn't roll out. So addressing diaper changing stations in public buildings, when we're talking about new construction or remodels, for me, that's just good policy. And I am saying that as, so for all of you parents of infants and newborns in the room, it's a problem to not have these when you really need them. So I appreciate the senator adding that piece in here. What I'm concerned about, and quite honestly, one of the few reasons why I would consider being a no vote on this bill, is I don't understand the finances of this. If we're basically taking the more or less the same physical appliances, same fixtures, sinks, toilets, that sort of thing, and simply applying potentially a wall and a different sign, I think I have 4 different fiscal notes, but the most recent fiscal note still seems to have an appropriation, and it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I really don't think that diaper changing stations cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. They cost a few $100 or a couple $100 each. So I can't make heads or tails out of the fiscal note. So wanted to know if the bill sponsor can address that, if when I'm seeing the fiscal note from April 26th, if that still is the proper fiscal note, and how the analyst could explain why something that to me is this common sense, and again, I'm looking past the controversial or what appear to be controversial social issues and language that's used in the bill that some people may be concerned about. Quite honestly, I'm not worried about any of that stuff. And if we're able to find a more comfortable place for, particularly, you've heard me talk a lot here about intersex persons with Turner syndrome or Klinefelter syndrome. I mean, there are enough actual, well, at least in my opinion, enough actual medically biological, if that's a phrase or an accurate phrase, concerns around this issue, to where putting up a couple of walls and a sign candidly doesn't seem to be that big a deal to me. So it's really more the cost at this point. I wanted to know if the sponsor might be able to address those for me. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Hawkins-Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the wanting to ask questions about the bill from the senator from Parker, but I guess I'd like to say that this is not controversial. This is basic human nature. This is basic human respect and dignity. The bill was actually brought to us by a dad because he was dealing with the same issues that we just heard about, trying to find a safe place to change his infant's diaper. But what was said earlier disturbs me because there is a larger context on which was mentioned. The fact that transgender youth and transgender adults are under attack every single day in this country, and that they have become the fodder for political gains or not, is really, it's really so saddening and makes no sense to me and is so disrespectful. And I guess I don't understand why that is happening. People not only are being threatened, but it goes way beyond that. People are being injured, people are being murdered. And so I don't want this bill to be caught up in that. This is a bill about dignity, and this is a bill about respect. So I just wanted to speak to that issue for a moment on this. This bill is also about seniors who have caregivers who can't find a restroom where their caregiver can go in with them. We have an aging population here. We are all going to need caregivers at one time or another. My spouse is a hospice nurse, and if she is with a patient and they're being transferred to another facility and they need to stop, and it's a male patient, what happens there? I mean, this is about so many people in our society. This is about folks with disabilities. It's the exact same issue. How do folks with a disability, how is their caregiver going to be able to accompany them if we don't create gender-neutral facilities? That's what this is about. So I don't want this to be conflated with this really disgusting other political stuff that's happening all over the country. This is about us as Coloradans respecting all of us, because we all have to use the restrooms. We all have to. And it sends a message that our public buildings are respecting that. To the fiscal note, I'll readily tell you, this went through a lot of negotiations with the Department of Personnel in understanding the buildings, understanding who uses buildings. Are they public? Is it just for employees? This was a huge undertaking, and I really, really commend the House sponsors that dug in on it from the beginning, because it started over there, and I really commend the advocates. It took a while to figure out, okay, what can we do? What's possible? We have limited funds, but this is so important. So, with all of that said, please let's respect the fact that all of us are going to be affected by this bill in one form or another. In 20 years, in me, it could be 10 years. And for some of you, 40 years. I'm just saying all of us can be affected by this. So thank you, colleagues.
Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. President. And colleagues, I thought that I was really precise in my speech when I said, I like this bill, and I like what we're trying to do, and I appreciate everything that the bill sponsor put in this bill, and I like the fact that we're addressing this issue head on. So I don't know how my words have now, assuming those comments were directed towards me, and perhaps they weren't, but I'm here at the well to say that I like the bill, appreciate the conversation, don't understand why it's a big deal, I am not concerned about what others said or what others state might be controversial, and am looking for a way to support the bill and am asking if somebody could justify the financial impact, because to me, this doesn't seem like this big a deal from a new construction and a remodel perspective. So my only question and my concern was strictly around the financial side. So certainly, I guess we can rewind the tape as to what my comments actually were, but my comments were meant to be complimentary, and again, happy to have that discussion, although I think we're on thirds and this is my last time up here. But all I'm looking for was an answer as to why, when we're dealing with the same fixtures, the same sorts of things that one would put when building a restroom other than one wall and a sign, what the justification around any fiscal impact would be, because that didn't make sense, and for confirmation that I'm looking at the fiscal note. So would still love an answer for that, because although I appreciate the Senator from Boulder comments, what I feel is misinterpretation of my statements, I still didn't really get an answer as to the fiscal note. Thank you, Mr. President.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion is Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I can't speak to the fiscal note, but I can speak to the necessity for this policy. I can't tell you how many times I have encountered a situation where my child has had to use the restroom and we couldn't find one. Where we had to go to multiple public buildings to try and find an opportunity just for them to be able to use the restroom. And in fact, there were times where we even had to put up coats in an alley so that they could use the restroom because there was nothing that was available for them. I agree with the sponsor that this is about dignity. And it's about dignity for a lot of people. I can understand having some questions about the financial structure, but in my mind, there are a couple of things that I think I don't care what the cost is. Another situation is people with disabilities. I don't care what the cost is to remodel a restroom so that you could put the handle on the right side so that a person with disabilities can flush the toilet. I just don't really care about how much it costs us to be able to do that because it's the right thing to do. And I think that this bill falls into that category. I also agree. I have had opportunities where, you know, when you have a little boy, like I've had my cousins, I've babysat my cousins or my nephews, where I have taken them into the women's restroom with me because they needed to use the restroom. But I felt a little uncomfortable sending my daughter into the men's restroom with my ex-husband. I just felt very uncomfortable about that. It would have been better to have an opportunity for a family restroom or a gender-neutral restroom, some sort of opportunity so that a parent could take care of their child, or so that a caretaker can take care of someone with an elderly person. But this has impacted me very specifically, driving around, going to multiple locations to try and find a restroom. And when we talk about our public facilities being open to all people, all of our citizens, I think it's just a basic, decent thing that we need to do, and we need to lead on this policy, and this needs to be the policy for our entire country. So I would encourage an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion is the adoption of House Bill 1057. Are there any no votes? Senators Van Winkle, Will, Baisley, Rich, Gardner, Minority Leader Lundin, Liston, Pelton B, Pelton R. With a vote of 26 ayes, 9 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1057 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Colker, Malika, Exum, Coleman, Hanson, Majority Leader Moreno, Marchman, Gonzalez, Janal, Zenzinger, Bridges, Sullivan, Winter, Cutter, Henriksen, Rodriguez, Fields, Priola, Buckner, Danielson, Roberts. Please add the president.
Are you going to be a no?
Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1076?
House Bill 1076, Representatives Doherty and Senator Marchman, concerning workers' compensation and in connection therewith, increasing the duration of benefits based on mental impairment, removing the authority to petition over artificial devices, allowing an employee to request a hearing on the loss of total temporary disability benefits under certain circumstances, updating provisions related to independent medical examinations, increasing the amount of attorney's fees that are presumed unreasonable, and making an appropriation.
Senator Marchman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move HB 1076 on third reading and final passage and ask for your aye vote.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of House Bill 1076. Are there any no votes? Senators Van Winkle, Baisley, Rich, Gardner, Minority Leader Lundin, Pelton B, Pelton R, Kirkmeyer, Smallwood. With a vote of 26 ayes, 9 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1076 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Majority Leader Moreno, Colker, Gonzalez, Coleman, Exum, Hanson, Jaquez Lewis, Rodriguez, Fields, Sullivan, Danielson, Priola, Buckner, Winter, Cutter. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1081?
House Bill 1081, Representatives Lindstedt and Taggart, Senator Henriksen, concerning the expansion of the tax credit for conversion costs for employee business ownership.
Senator Henriksen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1081 on third read and final passage and ask for an aye vote.
Motion is the passage of House Bill 1081. Are there any no votes? Senators Van Winkle, Baisley, Minority Leader Lundin, Kirkmeyer, Gardner, Liston, Pelton B. With a vote of 28 ayes, 7 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1081 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Coleman, Roberts, Majority Leader Moreno, Malika, Hanson, Exum, Colker, Jaquez Lewis, Rodriguez, Marchman, Fields, Bridges, Priola, Winter, Cutter, Buckner. Please add the president. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1223?
House Bill 1223 by Representative Bacon and English, Senator Fields, concerning the creation of a task force to establish shared guidance for entities to utilize and prioritizing grant money to achieve maximum impact to reduce negative outcomes for youth, and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Senator Fields.
I move House Bill 1223 on third reading and final passage and ask for an aye vote.
Is there any discussion? Senator Rich.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill was in committee, and yesterday when we did second reading, it got by us really fast. There was a lot of noise in here, and so I apologize for having to come up here on third reading. But it's something that I brought up when we were in committee, and it has nothing to do with what this task force is trying to do, but it seems a little bit odd, especially when you get to page 5, paragraph G. These representatives must be working in target communities as identified by the task force. They're part of the task force, and it seems like However, in order to have these 5 representatives from a targeted community, the task force must already have identified the 3 communities. But in order to pick the 3 communities, the task force must have fully appointed the task force, including those 5, making this a paradox unless the sponsors already have communities in mind but failed to include those in the bill language. I know that might be a small thing, but it doesn't seem to work to pick 5 representatives from a community-based organization working in targeted areas if the task force hasn't figured out what the targeted areas are. It seems to be a problem, and it seems to be that this has already been decided, and it has nothing to do with what they're trying to accomplish, but it just seems like there's a problem with the language here. And unless that gets fixed, because it just seems like it's already baked in the cake, I would have to be a no.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I want to thank the senator for bringing this topic to this conversation, because I did have a conversation with the drafter and also with the House bill sponsor, and I think I can provide some clarity as to the confusion that might be caused by the interpretation of what the bill will do. So the bill sets up like 2 task forces. One task force is where we have governmental agencies come together, reviewing data to see what we can do to reduce gun violence, to reduce suicide, and then delinquent behavior. These agencies could be public safety, it could be our behavioral health organization, it could be Health and Human Services. They're going to comb through that data and identify hot points that we have across the state where we can kind of zoom in and target specific goals to help reduce that kind of behavior in that community. Once they have this collective data, this is where the interpretation comes from. So we're talking about page 5, line number 11. It gives the impression that this task force has already identified who the task members are going to be. But if you revert back to page 3, 2A, page 2, 2A, it identifies that those folks in that task force are going to establish the goals, the objectives to reduce gun violence through data, and then they'll convene a task force with the members to determine which organizations, which communities then we need to focus on. So it doesn't need to be corrected. I was thinking about offering an amendment, but on line 5, starting on line A, it says 2A. Those 5 representatives are based on looking at the data already. So remember, this is a good bill. We spend a lot of different resources on grants and funding, but they're not talking to each other in reference to where the target issues are, and this will give them the opportunity to do so. And we're going to be using existing dollars by having organizations talk to themselves. So it's the right approach for the right time, and I'm asking for an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion is the adoption of House Bill 1223. Are there any no votes? Senators Van Winkle, Will, Baisley, Rich, Gardner, Minority Leader Lundin, Smallwood, Kirkmeyer, Liston, Pelton B, Pelton R, Simpson. With a vote of 23 ayes, 12 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1223 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Majority Leader Moreno, Henriksen, Criolla, Rodriguez, Winter, Cutter, Exum, Sullivan, Coleman, Gonzalez. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1226?
House Bill 1226, Representatives Soper and DeGroy Kennedy, Senators Roberts and Will, concerning transparency requirements for hospitals and in connection therewith creating more timely submission of data, providing insights into transfers of cash and profits and reserves, including those leaving Colorado, reporting all information received, reporting information by each hospital in addition to health systems, disclosing executive compensation, including compensating incentives, reporting mergers and acquisitions of hospitals and physicians, reporting investments in capital equipment and construction, and making an appropriation.
Senator Will.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1226 on third reading and final passage.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of House Bill 1226. Are there any no votes? Senators Baisley, Minority Leader Lundin, Van Winkle, Gardner, Simpson, Pelton R., Pelton B., Smallwood, Kirkmeyer.
Please don't.
With a vote of 26 ayes, 9 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1226 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Majority Leader Moreno, Bridges, Hanson, Jaquez Lewis, Priola,
I got chairs.
Fields, Exum, Buckner, Cutter. Please add the president. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1269?
House Bill 1269, Representatives Michelson, Janae, and Gonzalez Gutierrez, Senators Bridges and Gardner, concerning efforts to promote clinical stabilization for youth involved in the behavioral health system and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1269 on third reading and express my gratitude to my co-prime sponsor for standing with me.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of House Bill 1269. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1269 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Majority Leader Moreno, Kolker, Janal, Fields, Henriksen, Buckner, Cutter, Priola, Zenzinger, Gonzalez, Minority Leader Lundin, Smallwood, Kirkmeyer, Pelton B., Pelton R., Will, Hanson, Roberts, Mullica, Coleman, Exum. Please add the president. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1290?
House Bill 1290, Representatives McCluskey and Sirota, Senators Moreno and Fields, concerning the referral of a ballot issue related to the underestimation of revenue from the taxes on products that contain nicotine in a required notice to voters, and in connection therewith referring a ballot issue to the voters to allow the state to retain and spend state revenues that would otherwise need to be refunded for exceeding the estimate in the ballot information booklet analysis for Proposition EE, and to allow the state to maintain the tax rates on cigarettes, tobacco products, and nicotine products established in Proposition EE that would otherwise need to be decreased.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. We move House Bill 1290 on third reading and final passage.
Is there any discussion? Senator Baisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's a compliment and a concern that I want to express. So this bill, House Bill 1290, is addressing $24 million that is kind of sitting out there right now. So this $24 million was in excess of the funds of $208 million that were raised as a result of Proposition EE that was elected by the voters on a 2-to-1 margin back in 2022. Now, the concern that I have had, and you've heard me say before, but I'll keep repeating it because I think it bears repeating, is that the wording of Proposition EE and the understanding that I've always had from my constituents is that the purpose of that money, taxation on tobacco products, was to be used, and I'm reading directly from the language of Proposition EE, tax revenues primarily for public school funding to help offset revenue that had been lost as a result of economic impacts, and then for programs that reduce the use of tobacco and nicotine products, and enhance the voluntary Colorado preschool program. And then, well, that's it. But it's in that order, and especially those keywords after offsetting the revenue loss because of economic impacts to our public schools, and those very keywords, and then for programs that reduce use of tobacco and nicotine and so on. But third in the list is to go to preschool. Well, I don't recall, maybe my colleagues have, but I don't recall seeing much of an advertisement in position number 2 that said that we're going to reduce the use of tobacco and nicotine products, especially for the youth. I don't know what was spent on that specifically, but I'm not sure how effective those dollars have been used. But as we keep talking about the budget shortfall, the BS factor for K-12, that money could have been used to buy down by a couple of $100 million the budget shortfall, the budget stabilization factor, and it was not. Not a dime went to that as far as I know, but rather it moved on to position number 3, which was let's start the universal child care. Let me make sure the preschool program. So this bill is necessary to find a home for the money that was raised beyond the projected $208 million that Proposition EE was intended to raise in that campaign. And according to Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, now that there has been an excess of revenue generated from taxation on tobacco products, there is $24 million. It was $22 million plus the accruing interest that's got it up another couple of million to the $24 million that's sitting there and does not have a directed home. So it makes sense that there would be a bill to address that. So what I appreciate is that this is an honest bill that says we want to direct this $24 million to the preschool program. So here's what the ballot measure that would go to the people, what it would do if it passes and if it does not pass. So if the voters do approve the ballot measure, then the new tax on nicotine products is going to remain, or is going to resume as was authorized back in 2020 with Proposition EE. And then the money that has been accumulated will be transferred to the preschool programs, cash fund, and the general fund, but I assume primarily preschool programs cash fund, and that money will continue to be taxed and going towards the preschool program cash fund on an ongoing basis. If it's rejected by the voters, then that will refund the $23.65 million to the distributors and wholesalers in a reasonable manner determined by the Department of Revenue, and it would reduce that tax on nicotine products by 11.5%. So it will go back to how things were pre-2020 Proposition EE, and that money would be redistributed. I would just prefer to see that $24 million go to buy down the budget stabilization factor, which was the will of the people as expressed in their voting for Proposition EE back in 2020. But I do appreciate that kind of finally there's an honest approach here saying, hey, what we really want to do is use this for the universal preschool. So I'll applaud that, but I'll be a no because this has just been, I think, just something just done not right to the people of Colorado. They were asked to approve a tax, to spend in a certain manner, and it got spent in a different manner. And I think that's shameful on our part that has happened. And now this money would go towards more of the preschool program, which seems to have been the goal all along, that it was kind of snuck in there in spite of what was being communicated to the will of the people. And I think that's lamentable. I think it's shameful, and we owe the public an apology for that. So I'll be a no really on this, really, because I think that these funds sitting there ought to go to where the will of the people was expressed back in 2020. It ought to go to buying down the budget stabilization factor to make up for the deficit to K-12 that's been sitting on our books for quite a while. So thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to my colleague from Woodland Park for his comments. Just want to make sure, since I know the tobacco education and cessation programs were brought up, just that folks are aware of how much money was dedicated to those programs through Proposition EE. It's about $11 million that goes into the Tobacco Tax Cash Fund, which is administered by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. It builds off Amendment 35, which was approved by voters in 2004, that if you're going to increase taxes on tobacco products, you should also pair that with money that encourages people to not use tobacco products in the first place. And so that's about $11 million. And then Tobacco Education Programs Fund will receive about $20 million, but not, that doesn't take effect until fiscal year 24-25. Just wanted to provide that additional information for the body's knowledge.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion is the passage of House Bill 1290. Are there any no votes? Senators Van Winkle, Will, Baisley, Rich, Gardner, Lundeen, Smallwood, Kirkmeyer, Liston, Pelton B, Pelton R, Simpson. Rodriguez. With a vote of 22 ayes, 13 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1290 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Bridges, Hansen, Priola, Marchman, Cutter, Coleman, Exum. Please add the President. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1291?
House Bill 1291, Representatives Joseph and Gonzalez Gutierrez and Senators Winter F. and Fields concerning procedures for expulsion hearing officers and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for third reading and final passage, House Bill 1291. Apologies.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of House Bill 1291. Are there any no votes? Senators Van Winkle, Will, Baisley, Rich, Gardner, Minority Leader Lundeen, Smallwood, Kirkmeyer, Pelton B, Pelton R, Liston, Simpson. With a vote of 23 ayes, 12 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1291 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senators Majority Leader Moreno, Cutter, Buckner, Priola, Sullivan, Coleman, Gonzalez, Exum, Rodriguez. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1296?
House Bill 1296, Representatives Ortiz and Herod, Senator Winter F. concerning the creation of a task force to study issues related to the rights of Coloradans with disabilities and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for third reading and final passage, House Bill 1296.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of House Bill 1296. Are there any no votes? Senators Van Winkle, Will, Baisley, Rich, Gardner, Lundeen, Smallwood, Kirkmeyer, Liston. Pelton B. Pelton R. Simpson. With a vote of 23 ayes, 12 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1296 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Roberts, Coleman, Exum, Janal, Gonzalez, Malika, Majority Leader Moreno, Jaquez Lewis, Zenzinger, Bridges, Sullivan, Danielson, Buckner, Priola, Henriksen, Marchman, Rodriguez, Cutter. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1284?
House Bill 1284, Representatives DeGray Kennedy and Leader Senator Mullica concerning modifications to the Property Tax Deferral Program.
Senator Mullica.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1284 on third reading and final passage.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of House Bill 1284. Are there any no votes? Senators Van Winkle, Baisley, Rich, Smallwood, Gardner, Kirkmeyer, Pelton R., Lundin, with a vote of 27 ayes, 8 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1284 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Roberts, Exum, Majority Leader Moreno, Rodriguez, Janal, Kolker, Priola, Buckner, Coleman, Hanson. Please add the President.
This next bill is really important, everybody. Pay attention. Will the clerk please read the title of the House Bill 1240?
House Bill 1240, Representatives Brown and Amabile, Senator Fenberg, concerning a sales and use tax exemption for construction and building materials used for repairing and rebuilding residential structures damaged or destroyed by a declared wildfire disaster in 2020, 2021, or 2022, and in connection therewith, making an appropriation.
Senator Fenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1240 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion is the passage of House Bill 1240. Are there any no votes? Senators Pelton R., Simpson, Rich, Van Winkle, Smallwood, Mr. Minority Leader, Baisley, Will, Gardner, Kirkmeyer. With a vote of, and add Senator Liston as a no vote as well on 1240. With a vote of 24 ayes, 11 noes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, House Bill 1240 is passed. Co-sponsors, Mr. Majority Leader, Senators Jaquez Lewis, Marchman, Kolker, Janal, Zenzinger, Bridges, Buckner, Priola, Fields, Henriksen, Cutter, Winter, Zenzinger, Gonzalez, Roberts, Mullica, Exum, Hanson. Please add the President.
Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1283?
House Bill 1283, Representative Judah, Senator Gonzalez, concerning the transfer of the Colorado Refugee Services Program from the Department of Human Services to the Office of New Americans in the Department of Labor and Employment, and in connection therewith, making an appropriation.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1283 on third reading and final passage, and I ask for an aye vote.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of House Bill 1283. Are there any no votes? Senators Van Winkle, Will, Baisley, Rich, Gardner, Lundin, Smallwood, Kirkmeyer, Liston, Pelton B., Pelton R., Simpson. You can do whatever you want, Senator Rodriguez. You don't have to listen to the Majority Leader. With a vote of 23 ayes, 12 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused. House Bill 1283 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Coleman, Exum, Majority Leader Moreno, Rodriguez, Fields, Priola, Winter, Cutter, Henriksen, Marchman, Jaquez Lewis, Kolker, Roberts, Hanson, Zenzinger, Janal, Bridges, Sullivan, Danielson, Malika. Please add the president. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 158?
Senate Bill 158, Senators Gonzalez and Gardner, Representatives Gonzalez, Gutierrez, and Wiseman, concerning the continuation of the Colorado Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 158 on third reading.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of Senate Bill 158. Are there any no votes? Senators Coleman, Kolker, Jaquez Lewis, Rodriguez, Marchman, Buckner, Winter, Priola, Cutter, Henriksen, Sullivan, Danielson. Exum. With a vote of Gonzalez. With a vote of 21 ayes, 14 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Bill 158 is passed. Co-sponsors. Hands are going all over. Lundeen, Rich, Pelton B, Pelton R. Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't take this lightly, and I don't do this lightly, but I wish to remove my name from this bill. Thank you.
Senator Gonzalez will be removed as a co-prime sponsor on Senate Bill 158. The following senators are appointed as members of the First Conference Committee on Senate Bill 16. Senators Hanson, Chair, Priola, and Van Winkle. Committee reports.
May 4th, 2023, the Committee on Finance, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following: House Bill 1260 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations, House Bill 1309 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations, House Bill 1281 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations, House Bill 1198 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations, Senate Bill 305 be postponed indefinitely, House Bill 1189 be amended as follows, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation, House Bill 1257 be amended as follows, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. House Bill 1112 be amended as follows, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. House Bill 1257 be amended as follows, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we will break shortly to allow the Appropriations Committee to meet. The chair of the Appropriations Committee will be announcing all of the bills that will be heard in the Appropriations Committee. So if you are not on Appropriations, hopefully you can go grab a little lunch, and then we will come back after Appropriations finishes. The secretary informs me that they have ordered lunch for everyone. So grab a little lunch. And then after Appropriations finishes up, we will return to the floor to take up a special orders calendar.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. So the Senate Appropriations Committee will be meeting, let's say, 1 o'clock, so you have some time to grab some food. The bills that we will hear are House Bills 1065, 1069, 1112, 1135, 1146, 1147, 1174, 1189, 1198, 1253, 1257, 1258, 1260, 1265, 1273, 1277, 1281, 1294, 1309. And any other bills that may be in our queue. I believe that is the full list, but I have been known to be wrong before. That is what I believe the list to be, though. So we'll see you there at 1.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate recess until upon adjournment of the Appropriations Committee meeting.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will recess until upon adjournment of the Appropriations Committee.